Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Good morning for those folks who are in Perth, including one of our speakers. My name's Michelle Maloney. I'm one of the co-founders and directors of the New Economy Network Australia, and we're delighted that you can join us today for our NENA and Sustain webinar talking about and celebrating urban agriculture and Urban Agriculture Month. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge country. I'd like to acknowledge that I live, work and play on the beautiful lands of the Yagara and Turrbal peoples. Myself and our little office is here in Banyo, which is a lovely Turrbal word for ridge. And normally when I give my introductions, I acknowledge country, the First Nations peoples who have cared for this continent since time immemorial. And it's also important to me that I acknowledge my place in the bigger picture as a descendant of the Irish convicts who were carted over here unwillingly. We like to think that the New Economy Network Australia and sister organisations like Sustain and the Australian Earth Laws Alliance are playing a humble role in trying to decolonise hearts and minds. So we not only acknowledge that we work in solidarity with Indigenous friends and colleagues, but are actively pursuing a different way of being on this continent together. So I would invite you all to perhaps pop into the Zoom chat where you're from and whose country you're on. So the New Economy Network Australia, or NENA, is a network of individuals and organisations around Australia that come together through a range of different opportunities, peer-to-peer learning and sharing, education, webinar series, conferences, and more recently, some collaborative projects are bubbling up too. NENA was the idea was formed at a conference in 2016. We became a thing in 2017, and we became a cooperative in 2019. We're entirely run by volunteers. We now have a network of thousands of people and many hundreds of paid members into the co-op. If you're new to NENA, we really urge you to visit our website, neweconomy.org.au. And if you're an ongoing follower or member, thank you so much. For us, it's really important that we offer a platform to share lots of news about lots of amazing things going on around Australia that our members and partners are up to. For us, and for me personally, there is nothing more important than food. And it's exciting to be hearing all the remarkable things going on in the urban agriculture world. So I will not talk any further, just let you know that we've got 3 wonderful speakers. They'll chat for 10 minutes each, and then we should have 20 to 30 minutes for Q&A at the end. If you have any questions for our speakers, please write them in the chat, or at the very end, you can raise your electronic or real hand and we'll come to you and you may speak. But so today we've got the fabulous Nick Rose, one of our founding members of NENA, and one of the creators and managers of Sustain. We have Amy from North Fremantle Social Farm. Can't wait to hear about that farm. And we had a late scratching. Lou couldn't join us, but the wonderful Alana Flout has joined us from Project 76 in rainy Perth. So we're very, very lucky to have a third speaker pop in so quickly. So thank you, Alana. But over to you, Nick, and then we'll go to Amy and Alana.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and it's a real pleasure to be joining everybody today on a sunny midday in Melbourne. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge that this is unceded Aboriginal land and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any First Nations persons who may be listening to this webinar, or either now or subsequently. So as Michelle said, we're in the midst of Urban Agriculture Month, the second National Urban Agriculture Month. It's been a wonderful nearly 3 weeks now. Still a couple of weeks to go. Over 210 events. I think we're up to about 213 now across the country. So it's a real celebration and acknowledgement of all the tens, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of Australians who are engaged in activities like these, people growing and raising some of their own food near where they live or close to where they live. So just a little bit of personal background for those who don't know me. a big motivator for me to become involved in this work was, these images that I'm showing you now. This was a part of my Churchill Fellowship, investigating innovative models of urban agriculture in the Midwest of the United States: Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Toronto in Canada, and 5 provinces in Argentina. I met over 150 community food leaders and activists in all those places over a wonderful couple of months, 90 different organizations, and those people inspired and continue to inspire me in the work that I've been doing since 2016, which is with Sustain, the Australian Food Network. So for those not familiar with Sustain, we're a national sustainable food systems organisation, a health promotion charity. We describe ourselves as a think and do network whose mission is to design and build better food systems that's better for people, for ecosystems, and for life. And this is our vision. And really, in Urban Agriculture Month, our vision is an Australia whose towns and cities are edible. And we see so much goodness and benefit in working towards that objective. And these are some of the reasons why. I'm sure I don't need to talk about this in too much detail with this audience. Know that you'll be quite well informed about the context of the world around us, but it's really pretty extraordinary times that we're in right now. A series of converging crises, a decade the likes of which none of us have ever really experienced. We've got climate, we've got extreme flooding events happening over the last few months in New South Wales and also Victoria, southeast Queensland. So the climate emergency is in full throttle. We have COVID that's still with us and has caused major disruptions to our food system in Australia and globally. We are in an inflation crisis and cost of living crisis, such that Food Bank Victoria recently announced that in its 90 years of existence, it's never experienced the demand for its emergency food relief services that it is right now. We've got the war, the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine and the impact that is having on all kinds of things, not least food prices, fertilizer prices, and significant threats to global and national food security. And all of this is cascading into a health crisis as well. Food is the biggest cause of ill health and early death rather in Australia. And on top of that, there's a mental health crisis also. So there's a huge range of external factors, contextual factors that mean that working on our food system is really, really important. One small example, well, not a small example, but an important example in terms of how this is affecting us right now in Australia is with eggs, for example. Large increases in input prices for egg farmers that are flowing through to prices that consumers are paying in supermarkets. So you see there, what kind of inflation is being experienced with just one of a major food group in Australia right now. Look at canola oil in terms of the cost of inputs there, in terms of the difference from last year to this year. We're faced with a turning point, a tipping point. We've got a big challenge, a huge challenge in front of us, and we say that food and agricultural systems at the heart of meeting these challenges. The food system that we have right now has been structured around monocultures, around industrial large-scale agriculture. We say that's been quite destructive, quite negative in terms of climate, in terms of biodiversity, land use, deforestation. I could go on. That a major part of the response is that you see on the right-hand side, the proposition of agroecology, food sovereignty, and indeed indeed urban agriculture. So, as I said, over 210 events that are organised right now. It's a wonderful expression of the diversity and dynamism of this movement right around the country. We're going to hear from Amy and Alana shortly, who are two of a growing groundswell of momentum right around Australia that is taking back control over the food system into the hands of local people and local communities, and that's what urban agriculture is about. But we need to ramp it up, and I guess that's the advocacy message that we're promoting as Sustain. We can only just look north to our neighbours. Singapore, for example, have set a target of 30% food self-sufficiency by 2030. They're very concerned about the extent of import dependency they have. And so they're wanting to support people like Warne there on the left, the founder of Edible Garden City, that's doing a fantastic job with community gardens, rooftop farms, vertical farms and the like right across Singapore. And the Singaporean government is backing this up with investments of tens of millions of dollars to really build capacity and opportunity for for the emerging cohort of young urban farmers like Warne and the 35 people that he employs in his organisation. Going a bit further north to Korea, this is Seoul, where I was fortunate enough to be invited to an urban ag conference a few years ago. And you can see the kinds of targets and investments they're making in this sector. 10 years ago, they had 45,000 urban farmers and only 29 hectares in production in their city of 10 million people. They're aiming by 2024 to have 1 million urban farmers in Seoul and 240 hectares in production. And they're putting their money where their mouth is with in Australian dollars, that would be about $270 million, I think, on current exchange rates, a major investment in this sector to have a mass expansion of urban agriculture. And then going across the other hemisphere, over to the east coast of the United States, Boston, we see here leadership from local government, Mayor Michelle Wu, who ran on a platform of food justice and urban agriculture in 2020, a 66-page manifesto to be leading the United States in this area, creating 2 new, very well-resourced departments within the city of Boston, Grow Boston and the Food Justice Department, that are about giving real substance to the human right to food, with a commitment to granting access to land for African American communities who historically have been oppressed in low-income neighbourhoods of Boston through mechanisms like community land trusts and collaborative financing to really have a mass expansion of urban agriculture in that city. So these are some of the world-leading examples that we can look to. In Melbourne, this is something that we're really proud of, the work we've been doing in Preston over the last 12 months, transforming an abandoned vicarage in an Anglican church in Tyler Street in Preston into the Oak Hill Food Justice Farm. You see here a year ago, sitting around in that tin shed, sort of co-designing and mapping it all out, and there on the right-hand side, working with the local artists to transform that space and transform that space from 4 edible species into over 90, and a lovely partnership with the local primary school, Preston Primary, where all 680 of their students from grade 1 to grade 6 have been participating in a hands-on outdoor learning journey this year, which we call the Preston Primary Posada Patch. Kids love it, the teachers love it, the parents love it, and it's an example of the kinds of relationships and opportunities that can be so positively leveraged through placemaking initiatives like this. And just finally, this is our recent research that was commissioned by Agriculture Victoria here in Victoria to map for the first time the urban agriculture sector in Victoria. You can access this on our website, Growing Edible Cities and Towns. We launched it a couple of weeks ago. Detailed survey reports, which I won't go through in detail. I'm happy to answer any specific questions on it, but some key findings compared to the average age of the Australian farmer, which is now pushing close to 60 or over 60, urban farmers are younger. More than half of them are under the age of 45. The sector is in a phase of expansion with over nearly half of the urban farms and community gardens planning to grow and diversify, and 30% in a startup phase. So very much, in a dynamic phase and strongly values driven. With the, see they're creating a healthy food system, healthy urban environments, and responding to climate change being the top reasons why people want to do this work, with economic factors being, far down the scale of what motivates people to participate. So I think I might almost be up my 10 minutes, Michelle. Would that be right? Yep. So I'll,
Yes.
we've got, it's a full report and lots of information there, and just to show you our 6 pillars of our roadmap for transformation, which is our advocacy agenda for not just the Victorian government, but every state government in Australia. This is based on, best practice internationally. A huge opportunity for cities and states around Australia to really ramp up this very exciting sector. So I'll leave it there, and happy to take any questions a bit later, but pass over to Amy.
Thank you, Nick. That was an excellent overview. Very exciting. Amy, over to you to tell us about North Fremantle Social Farm. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'll just get my information up here. Nick, I'm really interested in those projects that you spoke about, and I'm going to look them up after the webinar. Yep, my name is Amy. I'm here from North Fremantle Social Farm, and acknowledge that our farm is in Wallilup, Fremantle, and our farm is on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja Aboriginal land. And thank you for your acknowledgement earlier, Michelle. We certainly also pay respects to elders past and present. Okay, so our project started about 3 years ago, and it started with the community wanting to grow more food in the community, more food locally for local people. So we had a board that got together, and they very quickly put together our vision. And I think for not-for-profits, little not-for-profit groups, it's really important to have a clear vision of the future and what you want to achieve, so you don't have any mission drift and you can stay focused, and it helps you really make decisions. So for the board, their focus was to grow food for the community. So we currently grow enough food for 200 members to collect a couple of items a week from the farm and to learn. And that learning happens through volunteering, but it also happens through more formal workshops and busy bees, which are open to everyone. And then, of course, to connect with each other and with the broader community. So very much our farm is a social farm, so we take that cup of tea break and the social elements, we take that really quite seriously. The cups of teas are crucial to our functioning. So that's our vision as an organisation, and key to the vision was our model. So we didn't want it to be an allotment garden or something that already exists. The board were really quite ambitious in what they wanted to achieve, and they're also very strategic and very business minded, but they were all pretty hopeless gardeners. But that's great because everyone there was working to their strengths. So the board had a very strong sense that they wanted the organisation to be a social enterprise, so not just based on the blood, sweat and tears of volunteers, and not just based on grants. And in my experience, I think grants can become almost an addiction for community gardens. So they really wanted the organisation to be really self-sustaining. So all models were on the table. The ideas were things like selling to restaurants or to go to farmers markets, and all this kind of all the ideas were out there. But in the end, they came to quite a unique model, and I haven't actually heard of anything like it. So Nick or Michelle, I'd be interested if you heard of a model like ours, which is actually quite simple. It's a pick your own system. So we have members who pay an annual fee. So for a family, it's $400 a year. For a single income family or an individual, it's $250 a year, and for concession, it's $125 a year. So not a huge amount, but for a community garden, it's probably the most expensive membership fee you'd find in Australia. But for that fee, you don't need to volunteer. You simply get the keys to the gate. You can come into the farm anytime and pick your produce. So we think we're at the right number of members, about 200 members, and it's been really successful over the 3 years we've been operating. We've now got 150 people on the waiting list. So we've also launched a social membership because we simply can't grow enough food for more than 200 people. So we have a social membership where people get the other advantages of getting the trucker's cap like Tom's wearing there in the picture, and they can come to the workshops for free or discounted, and they can participate in our olive oil press and a few things like that. So the membership model is really working really well, and with a little bit of fundraising, like a few events during the year, that pretty much covers my wages for 3 days a week and our operating costs. So it's really the members. So we've just got a huge downpour here in Perth. I hope you can still hear me okay. Just looking out my window here. Sorry, I'm getting a bit distracted. So what the beauty of the model is that people who are not gardeners can come and interact with the garden in a really meaningful way. So they learn how to harvest the veggies, and they can see what's in season and what isn't. They can experience the gluts and the lean times, and they can, you know, bring their kids down and have a look. But actually, to me, it's watching the adults. Everyone gets excited about watching kids pull carrots up, but I get excited about seeing adults pull carrots up for the first time. You know, they're learning how to do this activity, this harvesting with their families. It's really quite beautiful. And it's you know, like when the board proposed this model, and when I got involved, so I got involved as the farmer from the very beginning, started with a paddock of weeds basically, and I was actually really skeptical of the model, because to me a community garden or a community project should be totally open and welcoming. And we started with a very expensive membership fee. There's a great big fence around the site which actually has barbed wire on it, and there's they wanted me to do all the work, so there was no community buy-in. But I'm really happy to say that I've been proved totally wrong on all of these fronts, and the model is working. And I think it's because, not to overstate my importance, but to have someone in a role there, in a paid role, that can then coordinate things, make sure it's all working in a semi-organized fashion, and to make sure that there's jobs for volunteers when they arrive and food for members when they come to pick, and events happening, then that kind of brings it all together. And it means that people are welcome to the farm. So anyone can walk through whenever we're there, which is only 3 days a week. But if you come in those 3 days, you're given a tour of the farm and a cup of tea if you happen to arrive at 10:30. So that actually means that people are welcomed there. So it's working really well. I'm very happy to say that it's working well. So that's how it works. So there's some photos of some folks just wandering through with their baskets and picking the veggies as they become ready. And I put that little tag to say what's ready and what's available and how to harvest it. And the funny thing, you know, for any other market garden, a good portion of the work is to harvest, wash, pack, distribute, and do the marketing for their food. That's probably half the amount of work for a regular market garden. But we've kind of like tricked the volunteers the members into doing that big part of the work for us. So that's a huge portion of work that I don't have to do and the volunteers don't have to do. So the second thing that the crew really wanted to include in this project was for it to be very community orientated. So they wanted opportunities for volunteering and for community to be able to come and get into it. So you don't have to be a member to volunteer with us, although if you would like to become a social member, you can do that as well. But volunteers all get to pick the food. So at one point I was thinking, oh my gosh, we're not growing enough food for the 200 people. And I wasn't factoring in the fact that our 20 volunteers each week were also picking food, which is exactly how it should be. I think volunteers should be thanked for their work, of course. So we're there 3 mornings a week. They're absolute gems. They're really learning the skills now of how to do market gardening, which means I can go on holidays for 2 weeks, leave them a great big list of jobs, and they know what they're doing, which is absolutely remarkable for a farmer to be able to do that. But my role is to make sure it's all there for them. So volunteering is actually quite easy. It's different to having an allotment garden where you might be stuck by yourself in in a field and you have to work it all out for yourself, we all work together. So I make sure there's seedlings, there's compost, there's fertilizer, there's tools and tasks for people. So they rock up, I allocate them with other volunteers. So new volunteers often go with more experienced volunteers and they work on their tasks, and I will jump in and help as well. So when I started, there was not many volunteers and I was really on the tools quite a lot, but now I spend most of my time bossing people around and getting things happening on site. I think that volunteer management, like my background is actually volunteer management, and I've always been able to grow veggies, but not at this scale. So I've had to pick up those technical skills pretty quickly. But my background is volunteer management, and I think it's a really understated and really important part of this task is to make sure volunteers are welcomed and encouraged, and to make sure it's fun for people. We all stop for a cuppa, as you can see, and I make sure that people are thanked for their work. And I also make sure that when people come, that the farm is a guilt-free zone and an apology-free zone. So if people have other things in their lives that they need to drop their volunteering and go and do that, that's completely and 100% fine.
And Amy, I hate to interrupt, but it might be time to wrap up if that's okay.
Sure. Okay.
Yep.
Here are our volunteers doing lovely work. I just wanted to mention about the way the farm operated over COVID, and I think just in terms of the bigger picture, it's pretty important to kind of reflect on where urban farms are. And while it's you know, I have to say, like, we don't really have Coles and Woolies shaking in their boots because of our little third of an acre farm, but I do think the model could be really helpful in making our cities more resilient, and Nick touched on this. So to be able to grow food locally and have the space and the skills to do that, and I think that's almost a fundamental act, almost like a human right. People should be able to do that, and if we can do that, we can help avoid those shocks, and by having a more resilient community where people are skilled and there's space to grow food, people can walk into the farm in the middle of the pandemic when it was so frightening. People would walk into the farm and you could almost hear them, exhale and feel a great deal of comfort that there was food growing there right on their doorsteps. So if we can create more of these kind of farms or similar projects, then you can have little networks of very skilled farmers and very skilled volunteers, and then you're building a much more resilient city. And I think with that resilience comes a great deal of comfort in troubled times, the kind of things that Nick spoke about earlier. So that's really where I wanted to leave it, to talk about how we can build much more resilient cities, and also where we can actually value farmers for the work that they do, which is often not valued. And hopefully in the future we can all have a garden that we can just walk out to and have food growing on our doorsteps. So I will leave it there because I know I can talk a lot about our project because I love it so much, and I will stop sharing my screen and go back to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was really wonderful to hear the story, and making me hungry looking at all that food. And now we'll hand over to Alana, who is also in Perth, I believe. Yeah, also on the West Coast. Hello, Alana, and you're on mute at the moment, Alana. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, did I get it?
Yes, you're all good.
Awesome. This is all a bit too new for me. I like just keeping my hands in the soil. Thank you so much for that, Amy. That was wonderful. I'm also looking at a really big dark rain cloud, and I think that's probably what you've just had, and I'm just going to try and time this because I'm outside. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm on today, which is the Whadjuk Noongar people. And I would like to thank the elders, past, present, and emerging, because they have taught us a lot about fostering and caring for this land. And also, I just want to say welcome and happy Fabulous Farm Friday. Hence this beautiful face of mine. This was a bit of a last minute phone up. Thanks, Lindsay. And I have been harvesting this morning for some deliveries that I need to make. And it's also Pride Month over here, hence the purple. So yeah, you can just enjoy this fabulousness, and hopefully I don't get too much glitter over the keyboard. I guess my project and my story started probably 6 or 7 years ago. I built a little community garden in Vic Park. It was a bit of a neglected a neglected space that actually got sold, and it's now a car park, and it broke my heart. And as a result of trying to deal with my local council, I had some big issues there, and I basically suffered from volunteer burnout. And I had some wonderful friends who said, hey, I've got this house that, you know, you can just turn that into a garden and experiment with that. So I'm very fortunate that my landlords are pretty progressive and kind, caring, passionate people. So I have basically converted my, which you can kind of see, front yard, which is 45 square meters, into a little urban farm, which I'm calling and referring to as Project 76, and a pilot study. So I'm coming from this grassroots perspective that the people that walk past engage in a conversation with me, and then they realize that this is actually possible. So that's been the biggest thing, where people go, you can't do this, not in Perth, you're on sandy soil, it's too expensive, and they just throw every excuse without actually knowing anything and just tell me that I can't do it. So when somebody tells me I can't do it, I do it, and I like to prove them wrong. So I'm coming from the ground up, and I'm hoping that I can get the support of my local council and my local members of parliament to jump on board, because some of them are quite sustainably minded. But for me, I guess I've gone about this by amending the soil structure. So I've got a friend who's a geologist, and I have a couple of science friends, and I've got some pretty smart people who are helping me with, I guess, the fundamentals in terms of, I had sand. I'm sorry, I'm going to get absolutely soaked. So basically, I went about this project by removing all the couch grass and picking it all out by hand. It's taken me about 3 years, and we finally got there. I've imported a lot of bentonite clay and a lot of compost. So each of my rows are actually 10 meters long by 75 centimeters wide, which is a pretty standard sort of urban farming kind of bed. And in each one of those beds, there's 160 liters of bentonite and 0.9 cubic meters of compost. I then took a big auger bit and a power drill and mixed that with the sand that I had on site to a depth of about 40 centimeters to give me what I now call soil. And on that wonderful soil pyramid, it still says that I'm a sandy loam. But I think because of all the clay, I've just discovered that I've got a bit of a pH problem, but we'll get there. We'll sort that out. So now I've got soil, I can start working with it. So this is only the first year. I guess this all started in April. I managed to crowdsource some funding. I put my own pennies in it, but the community stepped up, and I managed to raise about $5,000. So that was really awesome. The support has been overwhelming. People want this, and I think I was really surprised by that. I didn't expect. Here it comes. I don't know if you can hear that or the wind. So basically, I mean, it's farming, right? This is what we do. We're out here in the rain. I've got a face on, and I'm in some pretty overalls, and I'm going to get drenched. That's all good. So for now, it's a big learning experience. I am basically collecting data because that's what I like to do. I would like to get to the point where I can say, this carrot stays in the ground for X amount of weeks. It costs me X amount to do this. So therefore, the true cost of said carrot is, which is pretty ambitious, but I think it's important that people know that what they're paying for their food isn't necessarily the true cost of it, especially if a farmer wants to live and to eat. So for now, I've been selling some of my produce to a local cafe who's been so supportive, which is what I was doing today. I'm going to be delivering them some chard and silver beet to make this spinach and ricotta rolls. So they love it. They love all the produce I give them. Anything I want to cut out, they're like, please don't just throw it away or give it to the chickens. We want it. It's fresh. It's great. And I think the other thing that I've learned is that, I don't know if you can still hear me, that a lettuce, if you harvest your own lettuce and you wash it and you put it in a bag and you put it in your fridge, it's good for 3 to 5 weeks. I mean, they don't go brown so quickly. So goodness me knows what the oh, this is real.
Alana, we can't actually hear the rain, so
well, that's fabulous. Well, can you see that?
We can see it. I can see you getting a little damper too. It's very windy. Are you safe? Are you okay?
Yeah. It's Perth. We're fine. It's, oh gosh, that's hail. Wow. Okay. This
Well, we
like
can
an
hear you perfectly
adventure.
fine. I just wanted you to know. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, this is drama. Maybe I should leave it there. My vegetables are awesome. Everybody wants to know a bit more about this, and I'm hoping that I can jump on board and utilize Amy's amazing knowledge and power and her model and kind of bring that to Vic Park, because we kind of have a similar social, what do you call it, economic and diversity of people here that I think it would work. So I just got to leverage the right people to help get some land, more land. Yes.
Well, Alana, thank you so much for a wonderful story and, you know, a perfect illustration of the forces you live with.
Oh, I know. It's great. I mean, this means I don't have to irrigate for another 2 days. I'm happy.
Yes, yes, definitely. Wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Alana.
much.
Look, that gives us about 20 minutes for some Q&A. We've had a couple of lovely comments coming in, just complimenting your work, and I can come back to some of them. Nick, I was wondering, I've got 2 key questions for you, which I'm sure you've answered many a time in the past, but number 1, could theoretically Australians grow enough food in our human settled areas to eliminate a lot of the large scale agriculture in Australia that destroys our landscape and cuts all the trees down?
That's a really interesting question. I think in terms of vegetables, quite possibly. When the soil is really pumping and alive, you can be very high yielding in biointensive market gardening, which is what Alana's doing there. And what we're doing in Preston in a wicking bed, a 1 cubic meter wicking bed, we're estimating that we can grow perhaps 20 kilos in one meter squared. So if you did that at a hectare level, I think it works out to be about 15 tons. So, the productive potential of these kinds of micro farms, like what Alana's doing, and I'm not sure if Amy has tracked, the yields at the Freo social farm. I think there's been a bit of modelling done for Adelaide on this question, and yeah, I think the data suggests and the experience suggests that if you know what you're doing and you've got good soil and you're growing seasonally, that a lot of food can be grown and could largely cover our our horticultural needs, our vegetable needs. Meat is a different question. Obviously, we're not going to have cattle in the city, although I believe in Fremantle there's a place where they've got goats, but I don't think they're for eating. That's more for the milk. Yeah, look, I think the short answer, Michelle, is that the sorts of micro farms, Preston, what Alana's doing, Amy, and so many others can make a really big difference, and that's really important for people who are in situations of food insecurity and have got really tight household budgets. I think that's where it can really make a huge difference. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Actually, there's a question here from Gabrielle. She has said, Amy, what funding did your farm start up with for the fencing and so on? Where did it come from? And what would be your number 1 tip based on the success of your model?
Thanks, Gabrielle. That's a really good question. So actually the farm before I started was set up by another lady. I found the farm founder, and it was set up as a different project, and she got a lot of funding from just various organizations, various philanthropic organizations. She actually got $100,000 to set up the retic, the fencing, and a couple of structures there. So it was very expensive, and it's actually a converted bowling green. So that's why it's such a great urban, central urban location. So she worked really, really hard to get all the bones of that done, and the irrigation was put in as well. So she got philanthropic money, and the site itself is a multi-million-dollar site. It's a beautiful area. So the site is owned by the city of Fremantle, and they allow us to use it on a peppercorn lease. So all of these things are really important if you're thinking about replicating the model. But the number 1 thing I would say in setting up the model that we have is the volunteer management and the volunteer management skills. Like in my role, I'm using all of the skills that I have, whether it's the technical skills and the growing, which I've had to really ramp up a lot, or my communication skills or my social media skills. Like it uses, it's a really dynamic role. So I would say, but the community are so supportive. So even when we have crops fail, which absolutely happens, they're so supportive and forgiving, and like, oh, but that parsley was so amazing, even though you know, there's bugs in the tomatoes or whatever. They're so, because they see the process. So it's being really visible and having good community buy-in and that kind of support. I'd say that my number one tip for success is to bring people along the journey with you. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. I was wondering if our speakers have any questions for each other before I go on with some that have come in. Sorry to put you on the spot. You can say no.
Mick, I've got heaps of questions about that. Well, kind of comments about how much do we actually grow? Because in our site, I've got no idea how much food is getting taken out of the farm, because people come at nighttime or, you know, when I'm not there, and pick their veggies. But we're hoping to, a couple of people have expressed interest in doing studies, like doing their masters on the farm, and we hope to be able to really get that down, work out what our inputs are and what our outputs are, and then also put a little like a little manual together like this. You know, a lot of people have approached us and said, oh, we want to do the same thing, and we just kind of go, well, you can come and chat to us, but we don't really have much data. So Alana, what you're going to be doing on how to grow veggies in our kind of soil would be amazing, and then we can just say, here, this is what we think works, try to replicate it. Yeah,
that's basically my aim, Amy, so awesome.
Great.
Yeah, I think and certainly if you're going for any funding, wherever it's coming from, what funders want to see is impact, right? Impact is the big word, like what changes are you making and how you're going about it. So we've been really, collaborations are super important, and, you know, we love working with researchers and clever people doing interesting things. And and one of the things I've noticed, sort of like doing this work over the journey, is and one of the reasons I really love it so much is because you get this affirmation through people coming into your orbit who just want to help and support what you're doing, and it just seems to happen kind of, you know, organically, energetically somehow. And so this infographic I'm showing you now is the result of one of those people who approached us about 16 months ago, Karen, wanting to do a bit of a career change. And she was embarking on a grad certificate in social impact at Swinburne University in Melbourne, and wanting to work with us to, you know, do her assessments in developing her methods and thinking around documenting the impact of urban food and urban agriculture. So this is, some of the results of the data and the metrics that she's sort of like put in place for us to track what we're doing at Oak Hill.
Funding organizations love that, don't they? They love infographics.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is gold in terms of actually going to funders, local governments, others saying, look, this work is really valuable. And we haven't even captured the compost. I mean, we've sort of, you know, composting about 4 tons over the last 3 months, just on this small site through different, you know, waste streams. So we have to, you know, build that into this infographic as well. But this kind of getting in place a system to track what you're doing, the varieties that you're growing, how much you're harvesting, where is it going, the volunteers, you know, the people coming on site, doing some feedback surveys with them, you know, our youth internships that we're doing, the school partnership, the other partners that we've got, all that stuff is really important. And so many community gardens, as you know, do all this, but it's, you know, it's not something that people necessarily capture or track. But yeah, certainly if you're wanting to, you know, tell the story of what you're doing and get funding, it's really, really important to be able to do this kind of thing. So yeah, we've been really fortunate to be able to collaborate with Karen to do that. And I think, Alana, you mentioned that you've got a researcher coming in to help you out. We were just approached by someone doing their PhD in she's doing it in anthropology and microbiology, and looking at kind of like soil microbial communities and human soil relationships around urban farms, and wanting to use our Preston project as one of her study sites for a PhD. So, those kind of things are going to be, really, really valuable as well.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Thanks
that's
for sharing.
awesome.
Yeah.
I think something important that I want to say, and like, basically in the time that I've been harvesting, I have not added up my latest tally, but I had harvested over 120 kilos of vegetables in 10 weeks. And those were leafy greens. Like, I had only just started cropping out my root veg. And I probably have got 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks of data that I need to add to that, because I've basically transitioned to my summer veg. But yeah, for me, that was, seeing that on paper was like, whoa, okay, that's a lot of vegetables. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Hey, we've got a couple of quick questions and then we'll probably start to wrap up. Let me see. John has asked 2 questions. What's the future for allotment gardening? And also, how do you manage your compost? Anyone can answer that. One? yeah, you go for it, love.
I'm in terms of compost for me here, I've got community compost and worm farms, a personal worm farm, which is a bathtub, but I don't actually have the space where I am to do an efficient or effective 3-4 bay compost system that I would like. But I know Amy's got a really fancy one of those.
Yeah, we've got a 5 bay system, and it's funny, as we were pulling out all of our winter stuff, our brassicas and stuff, I was like, well, we don't need to buy any compost. We can do it all ourselves, but now that feed is kind of dried up, so we do buy in compost. But I think it depends on your context, because as I put in the comments earlier, our soil for Alana and I here in WA on the Swan Coastal Plain, where basically the soil is not suited to growing veggies. So I hate it when people say it's poor soil, because it's perfectly perfect for growing natives, of course, but for growing veggies it's really challenging. So we have to have a lot of compost input. So I reckon over the year we probably buy in about half of our compost, and we make about half of it. So we do that, and we also have worm farms, which I think are like totally crucial. I'm like in love with worms. They're like the B team of our farm. So we plant our seedlings into worm castings, and I think that just continually, inoculates the soil with that good microbiological activity. So yep, we keep almost all of our waste we keep on site, and I've actually started to keep the weedy stuff. I'm pretty confident that we're getting our compost hot enough to kill all that, but any diseased, badly diseased stuff we chuck. So we have a real problem with nematodes, and all the root material goes off site. But we're lucky in our council, we've got a FOGO bin system, so our garden and food organics go off to a composting facility, so that I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so we've got a bay system at Preston as well, and getting different sources of food scraps and other materials for composting. So there's a local food veggie box, organic veggie box from Ceres. People might have heard of Ceres in Brunswick. Ceres Fair Food. There's about 800 veggie boxes a week, and they're giving us their veggie scraps from that business. We're getting mushroom straw from a friend who runs a shipping container mushroom business, Sporadical City Mushrooms. So Julia drops off bundles of mushroom straw on a weekly or fortnightly basis. We're getting coffee grounds from local cafes, and the kitchen scraps from one of the cafes as well. And yeah, a bit of household composting. So yeah, all of that together it adds up, but we're able to kind of deal with it on site. And I guess we're a bit lucky in Melbourne. We've got Sustainability Victoria. I'm not sure if there's an equivalent over in WA, like a state government funded agency that's all about promoting circular economy. And so yeah, this comes back to the thing I bang on about constantly, about the role of government and policy to really, ramp this up. So yeah, in Victoria, we've got SV, Sustainability Victoria, that's pumping a lot of money into community recycling with different sort of like community grants and things like that. So yeah, we scored one of those to support our work at Oak Hill through Oak Hill Composting and Resource Hub, they call it. So we've got a $60,000 grant to support our work going into next year from that.
Thanks, Nick. Lindsay has typed a question in the chat. Amy, can you tell people about the St. Pat's arrangement? That is great, considering most of the members are in a high socioeconomic area.
Yeah, so we really, you know, part of the visioning was to work out how we can benefit the community beyond our membership. So our one of the main partners that we have is St. Pat's, which is a charity that operates from Fremantle, and they support homeless people and people on lower socioeconomic levels. So we provide them once a week. We do a harvest for St. Pat's. So this is the only communal harvest that we do. Every Thursday morning, we pick maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 boxes of veggies that go to St. Pat's, and they make that into meals for people who need them, or they also send them home to folks in their really subsidised veggie boxes. That's like a really crucial part of what we do at the farm, and yeah, it's part of our social license to operate, because the farm is located in a pretty affluent area. Like, it really is quite affluent, so folks are really willing to support that, and in fact lots of members become social members because of that partnership that we have with St. Pat's. But we're looking at other things that we can do to, you know, help the world, and we're going to look into a pay the rent kind of system, which is we've still got to do a bit of research on that, but yeah, that's what we do.
Thanks. And I was reminded to come back to John's other question, which is, what's the future of allotment gardening?
Yeah, look, I think allotments is, you know, really interesting history going right back hundreds of years, really, to the kind of common system in England, and the idea of common land and people working in common, and then that kind of, you know, surviving, you know, the big upheavals that went on in the Industrial Revolution, and giving people space to grow some of their own food through these allotments in communal spaces, community gardens. So we've got that, we've inherited that in Australia in our community gardens. But yeah, I think there's a lot of waiting lists in a lot of places, and probably an undersupply of land for community gardens. And I think this is something where it's, you know, there's a real need for community members to you know, mobilise and organise themselves and make the case to their councils, particularly, and land managers, that they want access to these spaces, you know, for food growing, and to be the protagonist. And you know, we're really willing to support people to do that. And the peak body for community gardening, Australia, Community Gardens Australia, I know, are really championing this space and want to really see, you know, community gardens properly resourced. You know, Naomi Lacey, the president of CGA, makes the point that men's sheds get federal government funding in Australia, and have got their own special charity designation. If you can believe that, I'm not quite sure why, but they do. And they get federal government money. So, you know, surely community gardens are just as valuable as men's sheds, really, in terms of the services they provide to community, and you know, deserving of much greater, you know, support and resourcing, particularly access to land. So the future for allotments will be great if communities advocate for them and start, you know, really requesting and getting access to more land.
Thanks, Nick. Amy?
Can I just add to that? I think that's totally true. Like, my background is in a more traditional community garden, and it is just a bloody slog. Like, it's all run by volunteers. There's no, like, Community Gardens Australia is really doing a fantastic job, but there's always a need for more of that kind of support. But I just wanted to add that allotment gardens and a model like our farm, I think that that's like hugely important in cities, because now we really have to look at better ways to design cities. So if you have a community garden, whether it's allotment or a farm like ours, it means that you can have higher density living around that space. So even though it might seem like a big push for a local government or a state government to set aside land for this kind of project, it's not, I don't see that as taking away land from housing. And that's such a hot issue at the moment, isn't it, having housing for people? But if you have a space that is beautiful and green and is a place where people can be active in their outside, in not exactly nature, but in things that are growing and life affirming, then you can have high density around that. And that means that high density, that means that our, Perth is just the worst for urban sprawl. So we're pushing out our housing into agricultural land, and in turn that is pushing out into nature. So far from taking away space from housing, it's actually allowing for high density around that. And I remember reading how important it is to have high density around beautiful places of nature or community or green spaces. You can't just plonk it in the middle of suburbia and expect it to thrive. You've got to have a place to identify with and connect with, and a community where people can be active in their community. And that's what community gardens, whether they're allotments or farms, provide.
Absolutely.
Thanks, yeah.
I
I know that, sorry guys, we've got 2 minutes left, and I see John Peters, you've already asked 2 questions, but have you got one more quick one, please?
No, it's a follow-up on those comments there. Canberra City Farm, we're on a 2-hectare site. We've got about 60 garden allotments. We've got about 1,000 square metres of community gardens. But in Canberra, we've got about 30 community gardens, and they don't know their neighbouring community garden. And sometimes in a community garden, they don't even know their neighbour on a block. Canberra's been without a coordinator for about 5 or 6 years for community gardens. I keep getting my hand half up, but pull it down to volunteer. So I'm going to explore this more. And the other is the compost. We've got about 60 cubic metres of compost. We've got commercial worm farms. We've got a 2-ton solar composter. But the big problem is this backlog of 60 cubic metres of compost, which is made up of corn stalks, artichokes, really thick stuff that doesn't break down. So that's the problem I've got, or the farm's got at the moment. But thanks very much for the comments.
Thanks, John. And just want to mention the link I just put in there is we're having a Urban Agriculture Forum in Canberra with Senator David Pocock in a few weeks. So if you haven't heard about that, you might be interested in coming along, and please share it with your colleagues at Canberra City Farm.
Yep, thank you, I will.
Yeah,
I think that comment that you, sorry, the comment that was made about a lack of coordinator comes back to what Nick says, like managing a landscape and managing, that compost material, or managing, helping to build those connections between community gardens and even gardeners on the same allotment. It means that there's lack of coordination, and you need someone. I just I'm really passionate about volunteers, but I also think you need someone who can coordinate this and to make, to harness that passion and that dedication of volunteers and actually facilitate those connections and to help manage that landscape. It's a huge job for volunteers to manage an acre of land. It's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming, and I think that's why people do get burnout, like Alana was saying. I've certainly experienced that in my community garden work. Yeah,
well, that's why in our pandemic gardening survey we called for a $500 million national edible gardening fund to resource paid community gardeners across the country, as well as a whole range of other jobs.
That's what we need.
Well, and in NENA, we advocate quietly but definitely passionately for some of the greatest sectors of our society are all volunteer led, whether it's wildlife carers, so many other activities. So yeah, we need a really big transformation in our system. I'm just going to ask Amy Carrad, I think has got wants to quickly mention the national inquiry into food security.
Hey, sorry, I'm very shadowy there. Hello. So I worked with Nick on a project around food systems prior to moving to Canberra, and we were involved in putting in a submission to the New South Wales inquiry, and Nick linked that earlier. So far, the report from that seems pretty fantastic, and we've now got an opportunity nationally to put in submissions to an inquiry into food security. So I've put the information for that in the chat, and just kind of encouraging anyone and everyone to get in what you can. The deadline's the 9th of December, so it's not a lot of time really, but just to get in something that represents who you are in the food system and what you do, so that they see how many people are out there that are passionate about this, and like many voices from really diverse sectors of the food system, I think is really important. So there's 4 terms of reference, but I think there's things around governance that are also really important. So you kind of feel like you can also write about things like governance, like having a national food strategy, having funding, having someone or like a committee that's implementing whatever comes out of it is really important too, because otherwise we get strategies, with no implementation.
Mm,
Thanks, Michelle.
wonderful. Amy,
Amy.
Nick, are you guys able to send us something that we can put into a newsletter out to our networks to encourage people to, because I don't think we've put anything in our newsletter to encourage
Yeah,
people
I
to
mean,
submit.
you could kind of just put in roughly what's in the chat, or do you want something more
Okay.
definitive?
No, well, some groups who advocate have literally got model examples of things you can include in your submission. So if you've got anything you
Okay.
want to pump out
Yeah.
to folks, let me know. Otherwise, we'll grab that info there. That's great. All right, ladies and
you.
gents, it's now 1 past the hour, and it's my great delight to close our happenings today. I will just say thank you to everybody for sharing your updates about these amazing projects. And yeah, Nick and Alana and Amy, thank you for your time. Alana, I hope you're safe from the storm.
Thank you.
Someone's just asked, will this recording be available? Yes, normally within a few days. Again, NENA is volunteer run as well, because there's not really funding out there for people who are trying to bring everyone together to talk about the economy. So if you want to become a member of NENA, that helps us pay for the Zoom account, small plug. But yes, one of our keen volunteers will have the recording for this event up probably by the end of next week, if all goes well. And we'll make sure that you can find it on the NENA website under events and past events. Everything we've ever done is all there. Wonderful week of housing webinars from 2 weeks ago, many different sessions that we've had. So thank you again to our lovely speakers and to all of you for joining this. And I hope the rest of Urban Ag Month goes well. On a personal note, I'm about to start resurrecting my veggie beds here at Ayla House. So I will be keenly watching everything you guys are doing and learning more as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks
Well
very
done.
much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks.